When it comes to dating, there are two types of game: short-term and long-term. And short-term game is all about attracting her, and long-term game is all about keeping her around. And in reality, they share many of the same principles, but it's common that some guys will get good or at least competent enough to attract a girl in the short term, but then fumble everything when things begin evolving into something more long term, even if it's an extended fling and not necessarily a relationship. So let's talk about some of the biggest attraction killers in the long term and what you can do to avoid having things fall off a cliff with a girl in a longer term scenario. The first thing to be aware of is that the beginning is one of the most dangerous parts of any long-term relationship. In the beginning with a girl, many guys will be tempted to go above and beyond. They'll buy flowers and take the girl on extravagant dates, all while acting a certain way that isn't necessarily what he's actually like in day-to-day life. They'll flex certain aspects of their life and accomplishments and swoon the girl with visions of the future or romantic talk. And all of this is a really bad idea because you're setting a standard early on that isn't sustainable. And if it is, it'll take a tremendous amount of effort and faking it over time to the point where you'll just eventually burn out and things will just crash and burn anyway. It's not that you shouldn't put any effort in at all. It's that you should lean more toward putting in the minimum required to get where you want to go in order to create a more realistic standard that you can actually maintain. Girls don't want to be teased with some fake standard either. It doesn't make sense to do all this over the top stuff to hook her and then just stop. So just don't do it to start with. And instead, if you want to make kind gestures, make it an occasional thing. They'll also have more meaning because of that as well. But if you take nothing else from this video, remember this: you are always in the process of building an angel or a demon based on what you tolerate and what standards you create. If you set unrealistic standards, you will create a spoiled demon of a woman that will make your life hell when you're unable to maintain those standards. Now, the other aspect that is dangerous is that when things are early on with a girl, you will often be rewarded for things that actually lower attraction long term. For example, if you really click with a girl, you might get into a mode where you're seeing her multiple times a week or texting all day. You'll start to forget that familiarity breeds contempt, and that being too available is one of the fastest ways to destroy attraction. I always like to use the analogy of a flame, where giving a flame space to receive oxygen is how you make the fire grow larger. But if you stay on top of it and smother it, the fire goes out. And it's the same thing with long-term relationships, and that's why they're so difficult to maintain. The more familiar she becomes with you, the more opportunities you have to say something that you shouldn't or get too comfortable and let yourself start sliding into a worse version of yourself. But early on, when she's excited about things with you, she'll be in a mode where she responds quickly or she's always down to hang out. And it starts creating this habit where you carry on that behavior over time and it smothers that flame. But in the short term, you're being rewarded for it. She'll be excited to talk to you frequently, but you will be simultaneously destroying all the mystery and intrigue by not giving the both of you space to allow attraction to flourish and to have a chance to actually miss each other. How you start the race is how you finish the race, and you're either setting yourself up for success from the start, or you're playing into a standard that cannot be maintained by you and shouldn't be anyway. And the truth is that you're either creating a spoiled princess that will eventually crack the whip on you as time goes on, or you're giving a woman a real view of who you are and what your standards and boundaries are. And this idea of being continuously aware of how you're starting things applies to other areas as well, like your physique, your fashion, your finances, ambition as a man, and all of the things that made you attractive in the first place. What I've noticed is some guys will want to find a relationship because they're tired of the effort that it takes to date. They'll think that if they could just find that one special girl, then they could finally put all those games aside in the dating game and be able to experience a down-to-earth relationship with one girl where they can be themselves and just put their feet up to enjoy it. But this mindset is based in a dreamland that doesn't actually exist. If anything, a relationship should stoke the fire in you to level up even more and stay on top of the things that made you attractive in the first place. Because maintaining attraction over long periods of time is much more challenging than trying to get a girl to sleep with you in the short term. A long-term relationship is truly playing the dating game on hard mode, and you have to do everything in your power to prevent regressing into a version of yourself that is less than the guy she originally got with. Ideally, you'd be improving constantly in some way as every year passes. But what usually happens instead is the guy will put his feet up, kick back and relax, thinking everything is great because early on she's really into him. And relationships in his mind are a safe space where you don't have to play any games anymore, like when you're playing the field and dating a variety of girls. But this is exactly how you end up with a lot of bad relationships where they have a dead bedroom and the girl doesn't respect the guy, but she hangs out anyway because she's also stuck in a comfort zone or too afraid to cut things off. Meanwhile, the guy is confused, wondering why his girl sleeps with him once a year and why she's always complaining. And it's because you got complacent and let attractive traits of yours backslide and downgrade to a level that put you in a position of being less than what she signed up for. And as a side note here, I know there's going to be guys out there thinking that it's crazy that you have to maintain a certain level of performance or attractiveness all for this one girl. But keep in mind that this whole idea is to put yourself in the best position possible by patching up any weaknesses that could become a problem. And keep in mind that you also have the right at any time to walk away if a girl is becoming a more unattractive version of herself. And I don't just mean physically, I mean her personality, her treatment of you, and the way she's living her life. So it's not just a one-way street, it's just preventative medicine on your side. Now, the third thing is that you have to maintain being a leader and an example of someone that she would want to be led by, and most guys simply don't do this. In a previous video, I've talked about how multiple studies have shown that on average, women tend to score higher than men when it comes to neuroticism. And to review, if you're not familiar with the term neuroticism, one definition is a tendency to experience anxiety, depression, self-doubt, and other negative feelings. In a practical relationship sense, this would appear with emotions like anxiety, worry, fear, and moodiness. A natural counterbalance to this is masculine energy, which typically brings strength, stability, and calmness. It's the yin and yang balance, essentially. Higher levels of neuroticism is one of the primary reasons that most women you'll come across will instinctively prefer to be led by a masculine man that they can trust in and respect. And remember that neuroticism is on a spectrum. It's not that every single woman is a train wreck of emotions, and honestly, many women will actually be more stable than some men in that regard. But it is a concept to take into account when understanding the balance of the feminine and the masculine and what is traditionally attractive to the feminine on an emotional level. Most women you'll come across do not want to assume the position of a leader and having to make decisions for the both of you, because many of them are indecisive by default, which you've likely noticed if you've dated for any period of time at all, or just listen to them say it themselves. And the pressure of having to take over and lead increases those feelings of neuroticism due to the stress of being placed in a position that she doesn't want to be in the first place. So if she's stressed out by a situation or going through something difficult, she's going to want a man that will be able to guide her if she needs it and be able to support her emotional state in a positive masculine sense. It's not about fixing her in any way or that she's incapable of handling a situation on her own and having to babysit her, but more so about the harmonious balance of how your masculine traits complement her feminine traits. If you're a guy that is backslid in some way, or you're displaying the traits that lower your value in her eyes over time, she's not going to be inspired to view you as a masculine leader or respect you. Some of this works in the same way with men, and I like to flip some of these concepts around sometimes, because some guys out there will say, man, women are just so complex and this is too much, but some things are just human nature in general. As a man, you wouldn't feel inspired to follow a guy who had fallen off the wagon since you met him and had only gotten worse rather than better. He wouldn't rank high in your mind on a list of men that you would want to be like or would seek out for answers to your problems. It's the same thing with women, but it's amplified even more because she's in a sexual relationship with you. As a guy, if your boss sucks as a leader, you could potentially go to a new job or file a complaint with someone higher up and tell them that this guy sucks at his job. And it's not typically something that is necessarily life-threatening to you, although it could be, I guess, in a situation like being a soldier on the battlefield with an incompetent leader. But for a woman, it's a major problem because on a biological level, you're the guy that she's chosen to potentially reproduce with and carry his child. And the guy that she chooses for that is the biggest decision that she'll make in her life biologically. So when you show that you're incompetent as a leader over time because you've let yourself go or you're failing to display consistency as a leader, she simply won't feel inspired to follow your lead, which means she has to lead now, and she probably also has to find another partner, and all of these things stoke her neuroticism even more. The thing is that you're not calming her neuroticism, you're inflaming it, which creates feelings of insecurity and stress that she isn't in the situation that she wants to be in. Remember that if you want to be perceived as a leader, the crown is heavy. You have a lot of responsibility to uphold, so complaining that all of this stuff is too hard or too much just tells me that you're not ready to be in a position to lead anyway, and you're in for a very bad time if you're looking for a relationship to be your easy way out of the dating game. Now, one of the ways that you inspire a woman to want to follow you is by forging an exterior that is so well put together that it inspires devotion and admiration in other people in general. She should be able to look at you and have respect for the way that you live and carry yourself. She should be able to see that you're self-sufficient and capable of at least putting consistent effort into areas like your health, your finances, your appearance, and your goals in life in general. Ambition and assertiveness should be very obvious just by observing your life. And this is why you'll hear advice to always be leveling up. It places you in a position where where you're more likely to be admired rather than looked down upon like someone who is complacent and just letting themselves go. But one of the biggest areas a woman determines her level of respect and admiration for you, and especially in a long-term relationship, is your emotional strength and your emotional competence. Going back to the point about neuroticism, if you're more neurotic than her, what do you think that does to her emotional state and being able to trust in your masculinity and example as a man? It's going to destroy it because she wants to be able to look up to you and not down on you. If you're more out of control emotionally than she is, there's no reason to have you around because you're a liability rather than a positive addition. And again, this applies to humans in general. Having a volatile man around is a liability for men too, and you don't have any use to other men if you're reactive to everything and your composure can just be thrown off easily. A good leader has good emotional control, and they're more stoic in their responses to life's obstacles and problems. And the thing is that being stoic in a long-term relationship isn't about being emotionless. It's more about limiting your expressions of emotion to mostly positive and neutral emotions. It's not about being a robot, but it is about exercising self-control on what comes out of your mouth and what you choose to display. If you're upset about something, go off and get a workout in, or talk to a friend, or take some time alone to journal or meditate. But complaining to her or rambling on about how you don't know what to do or going on a negative rant isn't going to fix the situation or inspire her to continue trusting in you as a leader over time. And this is one of those areas where guys can misinterpret this idea and say something like, so what, I'm supposed to just be a perfect robot then and not be able to express myself? And the answer is no. It's not about extremes or being a robot. Again, it's about limiting your emotional expression more toward mostly positive or neutral states, and then reducing your negative output on average. And again, I feel like I have to clarify this repeatedly because I know certain people will take this to an extreme. It's not that you can't express any negative thoughts, it should just be a small percentage of your overall emotional expression. And you won't nail this perfectly when given enough time with a woman, because you're a human after all with emotions and perfection is just impossible. But you can exercise self-control more often than not, and that is inspirational in others. Leadership also isn't about being a dictator and shouting orders for her to follow. It's mostly about leading by example so that others naturally respect and want to follow you. She has to be able to emotionally rely on you as the guy that can hear her out and will have the answers if she needs them. She can only respect your guidance if you're a guy that can show he can guide himself and others effectively. And it's not always about having the perfect answer either. Sometimes she just wants to feel a man's strength as her emotions run wild, and saying something as simple as, "It's not a big deal, I'll handle it," or "We'll figure this out, don't worry," can be enough to calm her neuroticism in some cases and stoke the fire of attraction because she feels safe with your guidance and stability. All of these points connect together, and another one is that having your priorities out of order can ruin attraction and destroy your perception as someone that can lead her. You'll hear guys talk about how their girl is the boss, or they'll just behave in a subservient way that always has the girl at the top of his priorities in his mind, and this puts you on a bad trajectory toward being viewed as less than her. And once again, you've crushed the dynamic of her being able to look up to you rather than looking down on you. As I've said before, the temptation of complacency and backsliding is one of the hardest parts of a long-term relationship, which is why people typically gain weight, let themselves go, and abandon their aspirations that they had before the relationship. But in order to help keep the attraction alive, you have to put her further down your priority list. Your ambition and goals have to stay number one, because that is what will keep you on a path that will keep you staying on top of the things that made you attractive in the first place. And it'll also put you in a good position if the relationship breaks up. And then number two, or really it's just interchangeable with number one, is your self-respect and your dignity as a man. Again, it's not about being a dictator because people don't genuinely respect dictators, but it is about being clear on who you are as a man and being decisive on what you will and will not tolerate. You don't need to be aggressive with women or mistreat them, but you must be able to state your standards in a direct, simple, and cool and calm way. You shouldn't ever demand respect out of anyone because of how weak that looks, but you shouldn't tolerate disrespect either. And you can enforce those boundaries by being direct and calm about it and by removing yourself if necessary. On some level, she should know that you won't tolerate certain treatment or she will lose you. And expressing this with some kind of negative emotional outburst is the exact way that you should not make this known. Again, this just makes you appear weak and out of control. It's not about ultimatums, it's about your standards. Ultimatums are for weak people who don't have any control, and standards are about boundaries and self-respect. There's a big difference there. And in a video like this, I can't navigate the situation for you or tell you exactly what to say, but your standards should be the thing that guides you, and a direct, calm demeanor that isn't out of control or aggressive. It's about being firm and it's about being fair, because that's a responsibility that's placed on you as a leader. And to revisit what I said earlier about being aware of the fact that you're always building an angel or a demon based on what you say, allow, and the actions that you take, you have to be continuously aware of this dynamic over time, and allowing yourself to stay in a situation where a woman freely crosses lines of disrespect or doesn't meet your standards that you prefer is a one-way ticket to ending up in a hellacious relationship to where years go by and you ask yourself, how did I even get here? Anyway, check the links in the description if you want to book a call or check out some of the things I have to offer. And make sure you watch this video next, where I talk about one of the crucial mistakes that men make when it comes to understanding genuine attraction with a woman. And I will see you in the next one.